My name's Andrew Hugill. I'm a professor of music and of creative computing. So I founded the creative computing course at the University of Leicester, which started this year. My background is as a composer and a musicologist, but also I've worked with computing since the 1970s, hence the sideways move. And part of the reason why I moved sideways was because of the consequences of Menieres disease. I was diagnosed with Menieres in 2009. Menieres, for those who don't know, is a combination of symptoms. So the first one is vertigo, so pretty serious balance disorder, hearing loss, tinnitus, and oral fullness. One other symptom that is not much talked about but has become more important to me over recent years is diplocusis. Diplocusis is where you hear two different pitches, one in one ear and one in the other. So if someone plays a note on a piano, I now hear two notes, one of which is out of tune with the other note. And this affects my listening quite a lot, and I'm quite interested in that. I've climbed a ladder of treatment, starting with a low-salt diet and avoiding other triggers like caffeine, and then increasingly into drug treatments initially, beta-histine, various other drugs, and then an operation to install a grommet in my right ear, which relieved pressure in the inner ear, but still didn't resolve the vertigo. And then eventually the culmination of it was a series of gentamicin injections into the inner ear in my right ear, which is essentially a chemical labyrinthectomy. What it does is to completely destroy the balance function in one ear, which means that I now can only balance using my eyes. So I can't walk at night, for example, because I fall over. So I have to have light to be able to see where I'm going so that I can balance. However, the good news is that did resolve the vertigo largely. I still do get vertigo episodes, but not anything like on the level that I was getting back in 2010-11. At that time, my episodes were up to 5 hours of rotational vertigo, accompanied by constant vomiting, and it was totally debilitating, and I couldn't really stand up for long periods. So having these treatments made a big difference to my life. So what's happened since then is that I've really been left with the other symptoms as the primary issue for me. So hearing loss, so my hearing loss is severe in my right ear and mild in my left ear. And the fact that they're unbalanced. So I have bilateral Menieres, but as is typical with Menieres, it tends to affect one side more than the other. So the left side is less affected than the right side. So my hearing is unbalanced, which is a bit like me really. I'm also unbalanced. And then of course tinnitus, which is a constant presence and varies a lot. So some people who have tinnitus have just a kind of steady state, it's always the same. With me it varies constantly, so it can vary within the space of an hour or a day or a week. So that's something to contend with, and that's in both ears, but again much more severe in the right ear than the left ear. And then, as I said, also diplocusis, which is not really a recognised diagnostic symptom of Menieres disease, but is real. And what I've found, I've done some research on this, what I've found is that everybody who has Menieres actually has diplocusis as well. And this is quite interesting and something that I think could be researched more. So that's the story of my sort of brief summary of my case history, as it were. In terms of my professional life, obviously it had a big effect on my music making. So whereas before my ears were renowned for their accuracy, now I find that I can't really hear music very well at all, and in fact I don't listen to music very much, and I certainly don't go to live concerts anymore. So this obviously, I had to change my profession basically from professor of music into something else. And fortunately I had this other area of computing and creative computing particularly. So I'm still very driven by the need to create. I haven't stopped composing, I'm still writing music. And there I have two challenges. Well, it's either I go back to making dots on paper, which is how I used to compose before computers came along, and I started working a lot directly with sound, with digital sound. Now, the advantage of writing dots on paper is, of course, I know what it sounds like in my head, even if I can't actually hear the results. But the disadvantage is that from a musical point of view, I'm kind of going backwards. You know, I'm back to the language of harmony and melody and so on, which is it's fine, nothing wrong with it. But I kind of moved on artistically from that into a new language to do with the qualities of sound. You know, so the other approach is to actually investigate my hearing limitations as part of my creative work. And so to that end, I've built an instrument which I've called the Diplocusis piano. And what this does is to accurately reproduce what I actually hear if you play a normal piano, so that people with normal hearing can hear what I'm hearing. Now, I don't think this has ever been done before in music, so the sound is quite disturbing, and so to make something beautiful out of that is very difficult. And but I'm performing with this instrument in Leicester on November the 30th. And I'm going to hopefully give people some idea of, you know, what it can do or what it can't do. But I must say I tend to see these kinds of problems not as problems, but as opportunities to find a new way of creating, you know. And likewise with the balance disorder, it's a new avenue for research for me. So now I think, okay, what's the big problem with balance disorders? Well, the big problem is that they're constantly misdiagnosed. You know, so I mean, even Peter Ray here will tell you that there's this vast demand for accurate diagnosis of balance disorders, and there's tremendous shortfall. So, I mean, over the age of 65, balance disorders is the most common reason to visit a GP, you know. Under the age of 65, it still affects 1 in 3 people at some time during their lives. And yet when you go to the GPs really are quite fuzzy about this. They don't really know how to distinguish between one disorder and another. Even Menieres disease, which you know, is pretty well known now, is often misdiagnosed and often overdiagnosed, actually. It's, you know, anything that seems to be dizzy at one time, until recently, they always said it was Menieres disease, and often it wasn't. Now they say it's PPPD, but often it isn't, you know. So this led me to a thought, maybe we could use artificial intelligence to improve the quality of diagnosis, to help doctors to diagnose. So I'm working with Peter Ray and with IBM and a group of AI scientists at the University of Leicester to try and develop an artificial intelligence for diagnosing balance disorders. So that's a kind of research project. I've already had some funding for that, and I'm applying for a very large amount of funding now to do that project over 3 years initially, and then subsequent to that, assuming we're successful, which is always an assumption that you probably shouldn't make, but we'll hopefully be successful. After we've completed that, we'll then add in a treatment. And the idea is to use mobile phones and data streaming to convey information to the system that can then understand that and help the doctor. And of course, you know, one of the problems with balance disorders is that you're never having a vertigo attack when you're in the surgery. So you only ever have vertigo attacks at home, unless the doctor decides to induce one, which they do sometimes, and that's pretty horrific. But generally speaking, when you go to see the doctor, you're having to describe something that happened the other day, you know. And of course, people don't have the language to describe this. I mean, what words do you use? Dizzy, giddy, spinning? These are all vague words, really. What's the difference between being lightheaded and being giddy? You know. So the language that we use is inadequate to describe the effect of a vertigo attack. But the eyes, when they move in a vertigo attack, are mathematically precise. So you can actually determine what kind of vertigo attack it is simply by monitoring eye movements during the vertigo attack. Why don't we do this? Because the patient is never in the room with the doctor when it happens. So now you have a vertigo attack, you hold up your mobile phone, there's an app that reads your eye movements and transmits that to the system, and the system analyses the eye movements and says, okay, we know what that is, you know. So then you can start to get more accurate diagnosis. This is the plan. So that's a research avenue that I've developed. So I think generally what I'd say is, you know, here I am. I'm functioning well. I've got a very high pressure, high profile job. I'm carrying out research. I'm doing many of the things that I did before I had Menieres. There are things that I can't do now that I used to do. I mean, crowded restaurants are a bit of a nightmare, so I tend not to, you know, go out much socially in the way that I used to, perhaps. So there are things I can't do, but I don't focus on the things I can't do. I focus on the things I can do, and I see the condition as an opportunity to develop new interests and develop research. And you know, there's nothing like a medical condition for making a professor start to research, because if it's affecting the professor, it's likely to be something they're going to get interested in, you know. It gives you motivation. Whereas if you said to me, pick a medical condition and research it, my answer would be, well, what's in it for me? You know, where's the reward? You know. But if it's affecting me, then I think, okay, now I want to know about this, you know, and what can we do with it? So, so my message is basically positive, which is, you know, you can use what the condition, the constraints the condition imposes. You can use those in a creative and positive way. It doesn't have to be the case that you give up and retreat. Although I totally understand why people do that, because it is very debilitating. You know, I'm not minimising the effects of it. But what I'd say is, things change, time goes by, and if you can try and find a positive way forwards, often you'll surprise yourself at what you can actually do rather than what you can't do. So life on the level is really fulfilling a very crucial function, in my opinion. When I first got diagnosed, I did what presumably most people do, which is I went onto Google and then I started going around the internet finding user groups. And of course, what the messages you get by doing that are A, inaccurate, B, terrifying, and C, unhelpful. So inaccurate because there's a welter of information, but none of it really, you can't rely on it, you know. The medical information is written in medical language, which you often can't understand. The non-medical information is just the opinions of people, which are often wrong. So inaccurate, and then terrifying, because basically what it tells you is that your life is over. You know, that what you get are these horrendous stories of people's lives that have been destroyed by Menieres or by the balance condition. And of course, you read that and you think, well, that's me, you know, I identify with that. So you then just feel like, oh right, that's it then. I might as well pack up, you know. And unhelpful because it doesn't offer any kind of community type interaction. Now there are some online message boards and so on where you can talk to others, but I must say I found those of limited value in the end. There were one or two individuals who you could get on with, but as usual with any internet group, there's always a bunch of people who are there either peddling some cure, you know, because there's an awful lot of quackery around this, or just people who are online making trouble, you know, just being difficult for one reason or another. So you end up, you know, not wanting to share a lot. So life on the level, completely different. What you have there is a group of people who are gathering physically, who all have balance disorders and who acknowledge that and want to share their experiences in a supportive environment. And I think this is very valuable and unusual, really. So I've been very impressed by the way it's grown so quickly, and I think it will continue to grow. And I hope that it will become a national thing, and possibly more. The other thing I'd say about it is that it's not tied to one particular balance disorder, and I think that's important because I think there are many different reasons for having a balance problem, and not all of them are to do with the vestibular system. In fact, I know vestibular disorders are the majority, but if you have a tumour, if you have Parkinson's disease, if you have a broken leg, you've got a balance problem. So all these other conditions are also welcome in life on the level, and I think that's great. To have that mix of people.